The werewolf kneels. Everyone feared the Alpha King's werewolf, until it knelt before a poor girl, shocking the entire pack. Welcome to the Story King, where every story is a battlefield, and every word is a weapon. Hit that follow button, because the story's here. They don't let you sleep at night. Chapter 1. The Beast That Broke Nations. The last man who looked the werewolf in the eye lost his jaw before he hit the ground. No one talked about it casually. No one whispered the creature's name around campfires or in tavern corners with bravado. The werewolf, the monstrous, blood-soaked enforcer of the Alpha King, was not a legend you told. It was a warning you lived with, the way you lived with the knowledge that the sun would one day burn out. 11 feet tall when it reared, fur the color of ash and dried blood, eyes, one gold, one a pale, dead white, that had seen more death than any battlefield commander in history. Scars stitched across its muzzle like a map of every war it had survived, and its body was a cathedral of muscle and old wounds that had healed wrong, jagged, and terrifying. The wolf had no name. Not really. The Alpha King had never given it one. It was simply the wolf, and that was enough to make grown warriors step back into the shadows when it passed through the war camps at night. Packs across the northern territories kept their borders clean, their tributes on time, their heads bowed, not because of the Alpha King's strength alone, but because of what he owned. The thing with mismatched eyes. The thing that never, ever knelt. Chapter 2. The night everything cracked. The moon was a bruised, swollen thing hanging low over the village of Thornwall when the wolf came. No one saw it arrive. There was no thundering of paws, no howl splitting the sky. One moment the village was asleep, poor, quiet, forgettable Thornwall, a settlement so small and so broken that even the tax collectors forgot it existed most seasons, and the next, there was a presence in the dark. Old Marin, the healer, was the first to feel it. She woke in her cot with her heart slamming against her ribs, her breath freezing in the air like a ghost. She pressed her wrinkled hand to the chest of the girl sleeping beside her, her granddaughter, Elara, and felt the steady rise and fall of innocent sleep. "Stay," Marin breathed, though the girl couldn't hear her. "Don't wake up. Please, child, don't wake up." But Elara did wake up. Not because of noise, not because of fear. She woke because something pulled at her, a quiet, insistent tug somewhere deep behind her sternum, like a hook set in the soft meat of her heart. Her dark eyes opened slowly, reflecting the moonlight that crept through the cracks of their wooden walls, and she sat up. Marin grabbed her arm. "No, Elara, sit down." But the girl was already standing, already moving toward the door with a calm that frightened the old healer more than any scream could have. "I can feel it," Elara whispered. "Something's hurt." Chapter 3. The Girl Who Was Nothing. To call Elara poor was to insult the word. She was less than poor. She was a footnote, a charity case that the village tolerated because Marin was useful, and Marin's granddaughter was quiet and kept out of trouble. Elara had no wolf. That was the cruelest thing about her, the thing that made her invisible in a world built on pack bonds and shifting and the primal hierarchy of fang and fur. She was unshifted, a rare, pitied condition where the wolf within simply never woke. Never surfaced. Some said it meant she had no wolf at all, that she was hollow inside, a shell with a heartbeat. She wore clothes that were 3 seasons old and too big. Her hair was dark and always tangled because she spent her days foraging in the woods beyond the border, collecting herbs for Marin, keeping them both fed. Her hands were calloused. Her cheeks were sharp with hunger more often than not. She was 17 years old, and the world had decided, thoroughly, completely, that she did not matter. Which is exactly why the universe chose her for what happened next. Chapter 4. Blood on the Stone. She found it behind the grain storehouse. The moonlight hit it in broken, pale shafts, and for a moment, Elara's mind refused to process what she was seeing. Something enormous was lying in the dirt. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that radiated a cold, ancient power even in stillness, like standing near a dying star. The werewolf. Its side was heaving, slow, wet, labored breaths that rattled like stones in a river. One of its massive front legs was bent at an angle that made Elara's stomach drop. Dark blood, almost black in the moonlight, was pooling beneath it, spreading into the dry earth like ink into parchment. A wound, deep, deliberate, something silver-laced, from the way the edges of the flesh were burning rather than clotting. Elara stood completely still for 5 full heartbeats. Every instinct she had, every thread of self-preservation her grandmother had ever woven into her, screamed at her to run. This was the creature that had dismembered armies. This was the thing that Pax whispered about in the dark. If it opened its eyes and saw her here, she would not survive long enough to scream. The mismatched eyes opened, gold and white, fixed on her. Elara did not run. She couldn't explain it, not then, not later, not ever in a way that made logical sense. It was the same pull she had felt in her sleep, stronger now, vibrating through her bones like a second heartbeat. And beneath the fear, beneath the raw animal instinct to flee, there was something else. Something quieter. It's in pain, she thought. It's dying. She knelt down. Chapter 5. The touch that broke the world. Her hands were shaking. She knew they were shaking. She could feel the tremors running from her fingertips up through her wrists as she reached, slowly, carefully, the way you'd approach a wounded hawk, toward the wound on its side. The wolf's breath hitched. A low, guttural sound rolled from deep in its chest. Not a growl, exactly. Something more uncertain. Something almost confused. I know, Elara murmured, her voice barely above a breath. I know it hurts. She didn't touch the wound yet. She placed her palm flat against the wolf's ribs, just above the injury, and held it there. The fur was coarse beneath her fingers, warm, despite the blood loss, despite the cold night air. And beneath her hand, she could feel the heartbeat, massive, slow, powerful, but faltering. Skipping beats, stuttering like a clock about to stop. Something moved inside Elara, not her muscles, not her mind, something deeper, something she had never felt before, a warmth that started in her chest and radiated outward like light bleeding through clouds. The wound beneath her other hand began to close. Slowly, impossibly, the blackened, silver-burned edges of the flesh pulled toward each other like two shores reaching across a narrowing river. The bleeding stopped, the rawness smoothed. It wasn't fast, it was agonizing in its slowness, minutes stretching into what felt like hours, but it did not stop. The werewolf made a sound then that no one in any pack, in any territory, across any war-torn stretch of this brutal world, had ever heard it make. A whine, soft, small, almost lost. Elara's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She kept her hands steady. She kept breathing, and she kept whispering, nonsense, fragments. The kind of broken, gentle sounds you make to something that is afraid. You're okay, I've got you. Chapter 6. The Kneeling. Dawn broke grey and reluctant over Thornwall. The village woke to chaos. Not the chaos of destruction. No homes were burned, no one was screaming in terror. It was a different kind of chaos. The kind that happens when something impossible is sitting in plain sight and everyone is too stunned to know what to do about it. The werewolf was standing, wounded leg still healing, still favoring it slightly, but standing. Alert, present, its mismatched eyes scanning the small, frightened crowd that had gathered in a wide, trembling semicircle at a respectful distance. And in front of it, barefoot, in her too large clothes, with dirt on her hands and tears still drying on her cheeks from the night before, stood Elara. She wasn't touching it, she was just standing there, looking up at it, her expression somewhere between exhaustion and something that might have been wonder. The wolf turned its head toward her, and then, in front of 63 witnesses, in front of old Marin who had dropped her basket of herbs, in front of children who would tell this story for the rest of their lives, the werewolf lowered itself. Not to the ground, not completely, but its massive head dipped, its chin touching its chest, its mismatched eyes falling downward. It bowed to her. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Thornwall had ever heard. Chapter 7. The message that came by nightfall. Word reached the Alpha King's fortress by noon. By nightfall, his riders had arrived, 12 of them, armored, silent, bearing his seal. They did not come to punish. They came with a message, delivered by the lead rider in a voice that did not waver, though his hands, Elara noticed, were trembling at his sides. The Alpha King wishes to know, the rider said, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere above Elara's head, who healed his wolf. Maren stepped forward, placing herself between her granddaughter and the riders with the quiet, stubborn ferocity of someone who had been protecting a child her whole life. She did, and she'll not be taken anywhere. The rider looked at her, then at Elara, then, and this was the part no one expected, he looked at the wolf, still standing silently at the edge of the crowd, one mismatched eye half closed, its massive body angled subtly, instinctively, toward the girl. Protective, the rider swallowed. The Alpha King does not wish to take her, he said, more quietly now. He wishes to meet her. With respect, with her terms. Elara looked at the wolf. The wolf looked back at her. Something passed between them, wordless, ancient, inexplicable. A thread, a bond, the beginning of something neither of them had words for yet. Elara straightened her spine. Tell the Alpha King, she said, and her voice did not shake, I'll come. But the wolf stays with me. The rider's jaw tightened. He glanced at the creature, the most feared enforcer in the known world, and then back at the barefoot girl with calloused hands and hungry cheeks who had just commanded it like it was hers. He nodded, and somewhere in the silence that followed, the werewolf, the beast that never knelt, the thing that had broken nations, let out a low, quiet sound. Not a growl, a hum, soft, almost gentle, almost like contentment. The Alpha King had ruled for decades with iron and fear. But the morning a barefoot girl walked through his gates, with the werewolf at her side, its massive head dipping every time she glanced at it, was the morning everything he thought he understood about power began to crack. And that is a story for another night. You just finished a story from The Story King. If this kept you on the edge of your seat, you already know what to do: follow, share, and stay close. The next chapter, it gets darker, it gets deeper. And trust us, you're not ready. Welcome to The Story King.